Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Lucy Superfox show. Today, I have a guest, and it's been a little while since we've had a guest. I have been on one. I've had a lot to say, as you all know, but I had to invite my fabulous friend Victoria. Now, to give you an indication of the kind of friendship that Victoria and I have, I think it was in 2021, maybe. No, it was in 20. Was it before the pandemic?
19.
2019.
It was
Time goes.
2019.
Yeah, you're right. I was thinking about it and I was like, oh no, wait. Yeah, so in 2019, Vic and I were kind of really building a friendship. We were getting to know each other. And I said to her, oh, I'm off to California on Tuesday. I was off to see somebody, one of my friends, and, just get away for a week and just really have some space. I'd been through a lot in 2019 with a divorce and stuff. And Vic was going through something at the time. And she was like, oh God, I'd just love to get away. I was like, come with me. And she went, okay. And she got on a plane 3 days later. And so that's the kind of friendship that we have, just to kind of really open up this chat, to really share with people the level of trust and also freedom that you can hold in a friendship without kind of the conditions. And actually, before we came alive, we were just catching up because we haven't actually spoken one-to-one for quite a while. But what I love is it's honestly like we're back in 2019, but just softer, more healed, more confident, wealthier, healthier, both of us. And so, yeah, I just wanted to kind of really preface this podcast from that frame of lens of fuck it kind of energy that I imagine is going to come forth today from this podcast. So Vic, for anyone that hasn't met you, doesn't follow you, doesn't know you, this is honestly the hardest question ever, introducing yourself, because it's so easy to put yourself in little boxes. But I'd love for you just to share a little bit, I guess, from a more kind of professional standpoint, kind of what you're about, what your ethos is, just so that when people are coming into this podcast, they kind of get a sense of what to expect.
Amazing. So I just want to add to that. I always feel like me and you are the yin and the yang to each other. You're the yang to my yin, because we're so similar, and we always seem to literally live our lives in parallels. Like we always seem to be going through the same things at the same time, but simultaneously we are so contrasting. Aren't we? We flow together, but then we're also so different. But I always feel like you contribute something to me that I don't have within myself, and I always feel like the yin and the yang. That's absolutely incredible. That makes me so happy. Yes, that is
Little
me and you.
candles sat here, yin and yang candles.
Yes, that is me and you. So yeah. Anyway, so who am I? So I very much specialize in feminine energy, and that has come from my own complete struggle with my own yin and yang. And now, so when I met you, I think, was I competing at the time, or had I finished competing? I can't remember.
No, you'd finished. We'd both finished, and
Both finished
you were going through a breakup. That's what we were kind of. That we were kind of like, you were going through a breakup, and I think where we reconnected, when we first met, you were just about to finish competing. I think you were in your last season. And then when we kind of really delved into our friendship, I think you were going through a breakup and I'd just been through my divorce. So I think it was kind of like, again, that mirror energy of like a mutual wounding, but from a very different, to your point, from a very different perspective. So yeah, it was interesting actually, because when we first met, you were coming to the end of your competing season and I was already there. Like I was 6 months in. So it's almost like sometimes I'm, for want of a better phrase, 6 months ahead. That doesn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it was kind of like that parallel was like one of us was always just in front with the parallel that meant that we could support the other one. It was really interesting.
Yes, that is right. That is correct. Yeah. So I was sort of coming out of that, wasn't I? And then for me, what I love to do is to help other women who maybe are like sort of a couple of steps behind, not behind, but just not quite where sort of me and you have got to in our own journeys, and just get them to see through the bullshit, of a want of a better phrase, of just all the conditioning that we live by all the time, so much so that it becomes so unconscious that you don't even know that you're doing it half the time. And like when we were catching up just before, there's so many things we talked about in terms of like hustle culture, even from like a hormonal perspective, which is what I also specialize in now. And just getting women to understand that a lot of how they feel and what they're struggling with, it's not them, it's not their thing, it's what they've inherited from years and years, generations worth of just bullshit, really. But if we're sort of going into the more overt explanation, I work with women on the hormones. So I work with women that struggle with fertility, endometriosis, PCOS, perimenopause, that sort of thing. And then also feminine energy. So I have a program that specializes in the dark feminine, which I feel like you, Luce, are the epitome of the dark feminine.
Well,
So
that's interesting that you say that because it was funny because I just finished a launch of Becoming, which is like my healing to manifesting program. So it's more about like going through the trenches, clearing, making space, then having the capacity to manifest, then stepping in. So it's more of like a manifestation program with a healing foundation. And it was funny because I actually introduced this year for the first time a feminine and masculine energy concept, but connected to trauma. And that's the difference. I talked about it wasn't about embodying your feminine from what I would call a more spiritual perspective. It was very much from the energies of the wounded feminine, the wounded masculine, and the embodied feminine and embodied masculine literally looks like polyvagal theory. Like if you look at it, polyvagal theory is the wounded feminine and masculine. And so I was kind of just shining a different light on trauma through that lens. But what was so interesting is I literally finished the launch and was like, cool, that's done for another year. Like we're in a different space now. Like I've got a new program coming out in May. And then you posted about the dark feminine, and I was like, oh, like I felt this like resonance with what you said. I just kind of felt that resonance of like, oh, maybe that like I resonated with that energy. And so I thought that was funny that you just said that. I mean, okay, so tell me then, and we're getting right into it now, but tell me what defines, because I've got quite a lot of questions from everything you've already just said. What would define a dark feminine energy to you then? Or because in like the program, that's the roadmap for it, right? But what would define a dark feminine energy? Because now I want to know if I am one or I have it.
Okay. Okay. So when you see people talking about the feminine, so I did my TED talk in 2021, which was on the feminine, but with that and with what of most of what you see on our socials or what you hear about in terms of the feminine, it's just relating to the light feminine. So you've got the light feminine, the dark feminine, and the wounded feminine. You can't separate them. So if you get your candle, your yin and your yang candle. So obviously you've got the black is the feminine, which is the yin. The white is the masculine, which is the yang, but then within each, you've still got the little circles. So you've still got a little bit of feminine within the masculine. You've still got a little bit of masculine within the feminine. So they can't be separated. The two energies in one container, but they flow together. So they're not like complete, you can't completely compartmentalize them. And it's the same with the feminine. So you've got all this light feminine energy, which is what we're exposed to all the time. This really compassionate, nurturing, soft, forgiving. That's the light feminine. But your dark feminine is just as equally powerful, equally important. And it's the part that as women, we are sort of taught we should fear it. You should be scared of that. It's not ideal, or it's evil, or it's too sexual. So if you're looking at history, people that were the dark feminine, you're literally looking at like Eve, first woman, made her own decisions, didn't follow the rules, and then was punished for it. And if you look throughout history, all these women that do embody that dark feminine archetype are ones that,
like the Mary Magdalene archetype.
Mary Magdalene, yeah, perfect example.
She's a babe. She's a babe.
Yeah, she's a vibe. She is the vibe. Her Lilith, who was actually the first woman, if you look at more historical text, she was the same. She was banished. She chose to be banished because she didn't do what she was told, or she chose something for herself. She was deemed as being too sexual. All these different things that we're sort of told.
Wasn't she
you shouldn't
then
be that
demonic? Didn't she become like the queen
yes.
of demons, right? So then there's this whole, so the satanistic concept of like, because she had that powerful feminine, the judgment and the interesting. Yeah, because I've not ever put that together. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's control. So when you look at that side of history, if you look at witches, so all the witch trials, all that side of stuff, they were just women that were independent healers, didn't follow the rules, didn't conform to what they were told they were supposed to do. Very sexual women, very empowered in their own sexuality, and all of these traits that we as women are told are negative, or you should be scared of them, or they're evil, or they're demonic. They're just all elements of the dark feminine. And because they're so powerful is exactly why there's all this control around them. So the dark feminine shows up in when you have an orgasm. It shows up when you tell somebody to fuck off. That person that's been driving you up the wall, and you finally go, do you know what? You can fuck off. And then after you sit and you think, God,
is that why you thought of me?
No, it's not what I thought of you.
Because my willingness to say fuck off is
But you do, right? But that's it though, Luce. Like, so obviously we're laughing about it, but it's in your ability to assert your boundaries unapologetically because that's what serves you, and it's not what is appeasing somebody else. It's not an unkind energy. Like your dark feminine is still feminine, it's still kind, it's still full of love and full of passion, but it's in a way that it's okay to be assertive. It's having high standards. It's being connected to your body rather than needing something to validate your body. It's being really present in who you are. It's that kind of energy. It's a really powerful, transformative energy. It's looking into the dark. People that are connected to the dark feminine usually are because they've had to sit in the dark, because they've had to sit in the shadows, because they've had to go through painful transformation, healing, rebirth, all these sorts of things. So my favorite goddess is called Kali Ma. So to me, you're pure Kali vibes. So when we get off this call, write it down. You're pure Kali vibes because you've got that ability to be really brave and burn things to the ground if you have to. Like I think this is where me and you are very, very similar. You're very fearless. You'll do what you have to do if you know that it's for the greater good. You're willing to go through the discomfort if you know long term there's benefit, and it's not just sort of your benefit, it's the collective benefit. So we both very much work with healing, transformation, and making women's lives better, and we do it from a place of love. It doesn't come from a place of hate, but we have the ability to do that hard work where you have to really go into some wounded parts of you and some unhealed parts of you. So the best way to explain it is almost like if you get your candle again. I love that we have a visual for this. It helps so much. So the black is the feminine, and your dark feminine is almost like the line that's going around that black. It's what helps to keep your light feminine safe. It's the container that keeps your compassionate side, your nurturing side. It's what keeps it safe and secure and stops it being from open to being taken advantage of or being hurt or, like that side of stuff. My little ADHD brain, I'm just going to quickly tell you this, Luz, because it's just a really fun fact. So, those two.
Love it. I'm here for it, babes. I'm here for
it. So the way that so what that yin and yang represents is actually two fish having sex. It's two sexual little fish. And what it's actually representing is how the feminine and the masculine merge together and how they're united. And that's actually through the rawest power, which is our sexual energy. So in like Taoist teachings, your sexual energy is equivalent to your life force energy. So I just wanted to, that's just a little fun fact for it.
I mean, you definitely, when you're having an orgasm, you definitely feel life force then, let me tell you. So that I can totally resonate with that. I wanted to ask you something that you just said about the dark feminine then. So why do you, I mean, I have a sense of why in terms of my own experience and my own upbringing, but I guess I'm curious about just expanding a little bit on why you think the dark feminine has been so controlled and contained. And I guess where you think that's shown up maybe in our present day lives. So we can all kind of wrap our heads around the Mary Magdalenes, the Eve, like the fact that that was just a different time. It was, but I'm kind of interested now, like why now is it still being contained and controlled when actually it has, we both know, an immense amount of power that could create transformation in some of the areas that the world is really struggling. I guess I'm curious on your thoughts on why keep it contained, or why is there so much shame around the dark feminine energy?
I think because if you look into history, if you look into more like pre-patriarchal societies, if you look into more matriarchal societies, all the things that we as women are taught to sort of fear or not talk about or be shamed about. So talking about sexuality, talking about giving birth, even talking about the anatomy, female anatomy, how we still can't talk about like female anatomy without it being like, oh, we can't talk about that. Periods, anything that's sort of connected to like sheer feminine female energy, they're all the same things that we're taught to be disgusted by or hold so much shame around. But if you look into history at matriarchal societies, they were the things that were revered the most. Like a woman on a period was seen as being at the height of her spiritual power. She was at the height of her intuition. It would be a time where women would go to, they call moon, like moon huts, and they'd go into these hut settings collectively with other women that were menstruating and be completely disconnected from society so that they could heighten their spiritual abilities and their wisdom and notice what was coming to them. Like your period will tell you everything you need to know if you've got the ability to lean in and listen. And I think just because it holds so much power, why do we control anything? Why does anything get controlled? It's usually from fear of its capacity to expand and to just absolutely take over. But I think we're talking like thousands of years now. So if you even go back to like ancient Greece, that's a very patriarchal society. We're still recovering from that. We've got a long way to go yet. Even down to words like hysteria or she's hysterical. The word hysteria comes from the root word that is the same as the uterus. So women are hysterical. Yeah, which is where that comes from. And obviously, we still very much experience that now, don't we? The amount of women I talk to on a daily basis that tell me nobody's listening to me. The doctor keeps telling me it's all in my head. I'm struggling with my period, so they've put me on antidepressants, and I'm like, what? Why? What a great question. Who knows? Why do they what? Why is our feminine energy controlled? I think just because it literally holds so much power. It's just, I think personally, it's coming from an unhealed masculine. It's obviously ego based, or what maybe we would refer to as the wounded masculine. And I think that has just become so vast that we've lost the capacity to hold the feminine as it's meant to be. And which is why now we've obviously got burnout culture, countless women with fertility issues, hormonal issues, worse experience of like perimenopause, everything that is our innate nature is suffering because we've spent all this time having to fit into a society that's just not, it's just not set up for us. And I think if we did have that shift where we did start to value the feminine, the change would be colossal, even down to things like Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. That's not set up for a woman. That's entirely set up for a man. So we'd have to completely restructure everything, absolutely everything. So I think it's partly just habit. Habit's probably not the right word. It's
Programming.
not programming, the
Yeah.
norm. It's that much of the norm. It's almost like you can't comprehend the possibility that there is something different, And I think religion has got so much to answer for. I'm here for everybody who's got whatever they believe in, and I'm so up for celebrating everybody. However, I do think religion has got so much to answer for in terms of how we as women are treated, how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about our bodies, how we express ourselves. It's, to me, that's the point in history where the feminine was completely suppressed. That, and also modern medicine as well. I think modern medicine's got a lot to answer for in terms of that as well.
What I actually want to... Yeah, I could go.
Sorry, I was going to say, what was the original question? I can't remember.
It doesn't matter because wherever we went was perfect. So my next question for you, though, and this is something because I've not really explored on this podcast at all, and actually even on my previous podcast, so I think this is really worthwhile exploring, is let's talk about fertility. So, women, we're both the same age, we're 37. We have got lots of friends who had kids young, and we've got lots of friends who had kids later. And so between us, we've got kind of the whole experience and plethora. I guess what I'm interested in is connected to what we've been talking about. So the energy side of things, the kind of the healing, the wounding side of things, but also then we've obviously got the physiological elements. So, chemical, what we're taking, what we're doing for ourselves. I have some theories on fertility that I've never shared personally. And that is because it's not a battle I feel I can win. And I'm a competitive person. So unless I feel like I can stand strong in my opinion and not be battled, sometimes I don't put it out there for, but equally because I've not had children and I've never been pregnant. I've never pursued being pregnant. It's not something, that I'm called to particularly. I love the idea of having a family later, but, some people already know myself and my husband do a lot with the foster care service. So like we already have kind of, that is probably where we'll end up should we have a family later on down that road. But I have some theories around fertility that are not to do with nutrition, and not because that isn't important, it absolutely is. They are not to do with gut health, and they are a lot to do with the state of one's nervous system through trauma. And again, I'm being really light here because there's a lot of people in my circle, circle and wider circle and audience that have been struggling with fertility for years. And what I never want to do is diminish someone's truth of their experience. So, said very much through the lens of a theory and an idea, that fertility has a lot to do with the state of one's nervous system and the energy flow through one's body and how safe it is to be pregnant. So I am curious, as somebody who works with women on fertility, as in you are someone who works with women on fertility, what your thoughts are on modern day fertility and the rise of IVF, and what your, seeing as I've just unearthed this theory I've had for a while and not said anything about, what your honest views are on what this fertility or lack of fertility epidemic is about. And I also have some strong, what some other people would call conspiracy theories, but maybe we'll leave those for another day around what happened in 2020. So you know what I mean? And anyone who knows what I mean knows what I mean. So tell me, where's your feeling at with fertility? What is the, and again, these are our feelings, guys. This is not, 70 episode studies from PubMed. Like, this is not what we're approaching this through. This is theories based on what we know and have experienced. But I guess, where's your thoughts and feelings at around modern day fertility and the challenges that seem to have become an epidemic?
So my personal opinion is you're absolutely right, Luce. But I think what we try and do is, so for example, if you've got someone that's struggling with fertility, what most people will try and do is and this is a Western thing. This is absolutely a Western thing. We try and get down to the detail because we are in such a masculine energy. We need the detail. We need the minute. This is the answer. This is the reason why. And actually, a lot of the time, it's got to be a holistic perspective. It probably isn't just one thing, it's a collective. So when you're working with someone who's struggling with the hormones or fertility or endometriosis, adenomyosis, PCOS, you've got to look at everything. You have to look at the physiology, of course, and the more sort of westernized things of nutrition, literally things down to a chemical level. But your body doesn't work in isolation. It is an entire cosmos. It's got so many different things going on, and you have to consider everything. So you've got to consider the emotional side. You have to consider trauma. This is what I would do. So I would go through absolutely everything. Your history, your previous experiences, any sexual trauma that's there, obviously nervous system related, polyvagal theory side of stuff, and then looking at your entire ecosystem. How's the liver functioning? What is your gut health like? But it's everything. And even when you're looking at research, I love research, but I'm always going to go with a woman's own account of something before I'm going to go off a piece of paper. I see it all the time on socials. Yeah, but research says X, Y, Z. I don't give a shit. I've got 30 women that are telling me this. So I'm going to go with this real life account of women, because we don't do that. We don't listen to women. We tell them that they're crazy or it's in their head or blah, 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 because this piece of paper says otherwise. I don't give a shit about the paper. I'm listening to these women. But it's looking at absolutely everything. It's considering everything into account and then working on things in a much more holistic way. But I completely agree in that our experiences, our trauma, what we're holding in our nervous system has a huge implication on fertility. Because if you think in terms of like the feminine is a receptive energy. It's got to be in a position to be able to receive. And if it's not, and if it's completely sort of shut down to either not giving anything out or not receiving anything in return, it has to be, you have to be in a position of safety, complete safety, in order to be able to receive. And a lot of the work that you do with women, you sort of get to know that they either feel that they're unworthy to hold a child, which they might be aware of, they might be completely unaware of, or they just simply don't feel safe in their marriage, in their job, or whatever it may be. All these different things, your body's listening. Your body's so clever and it responds in so many different ways. But there's research for things like, I'm trying to think, you have things like women that experience childhood sexual trauma are significantly more susceptible to experiencing womb ecology problems. So they're more likely to have bacterial vaginosis all the time. They're more likely to have thrush all the time. And so then you've got to work with that. So is it that the thrush and the BV is the problem, or is it the childhood trauma that's the problem? Because the link is there. or you have women that are more susceptible to having fibroids or that sort of thing, generally tend to be codependent or carrying too much or don't express their emotions. Like the links between energies, emotions, physicality is massive, and nobody's looking at it. Nobody's considering it. Even down to things like PMS. Women that have PMS, I can't remember the exact statistic, but are statistically more likely to have alcoholic fathers. Like, just there's so many things that sort of piece together in all these different ways. But in terms of like your nervous system and previous experiences of trauma is huge, is a huge thing to consider in fertility. It's massive. And you sometimes have women that when they start to work through that, and really get into like the deeper layers of why they don't feel receptive, or they're not connected to the feminine energy, all of a sudden, randomly, and these are women that might have been through rounds of IVF, suddenly get pregnant. Like your body knows, your body's so intuitive, it's holding so much wisdom. And the thing I always try and get across to women is that don't hate your body for it. Say thank you to your body for it. Tell your body thank you so much for showing up for me in the way that you're deeming is the best thing for me right now. You're deeming that that is the right thing for me because I'm not in a position to bring this energy in. Because I think we also do that to women as well. We sort of put everything on them. It's your fault. It's your fault that this is happening, blah, blah, blah. But then obviously we also have to look at the sort of lives that we live in 2025, and 2020 was a great example of the long-term impact, the amount of cosmetics that we use, the toxicity of everything that we have around us. Your body's going to respond to that too. So there was a study done to test what was actually in women's menstrual blood, and they looked at plastics, all sorts of different things, lots of different chemicals they looked at, and your period blood itself is a detox pathway, and the amount of toxic crap that's in there because it's desperately trying to get it out of your body. So there's so many different things that you have to consider. So I don't think it's one thing, and I think we're going to make a massive mistake whichever one way you go down, because it's all of it, and you have to take every single woman as a unique expression of the feminine, because we do that as well, don't we? It's normal or it's not normal. What the fuck is normal or not normal? Because it's a spectrum, isn't it? So I think as well as trying to understand what the fertility issues are, you also have to take every single woman as a unique expression of the feminine as well. And what is relative to one woman is not relative to another woman. So sometimes people will ask me, what's the best thing to do for X, Y, and Z? And I'm always like, there isn't a best thing for that. There's a best thing for just you. So the journey is discovering what is the better thing for you. And for a lot of women, that will be working on previous trauma, regulating the nervous system, getting them in positions where they actually just feel fucking safe to surrender to the whole of life, let alone their partner. And it's all of it together. But the research shows now that it isn't the sperm that chooses the egg, it's the egg that chooses the sperm. So if your magical little egg is not in a position to receive, it's going to tell them all to do one, because it's not in a position where it's got the ability to.
And you know what's so crazy about that? And it's not crazy, it's so true. And there's a few things I want to touch on here. But one of the things that there's a great parallel with everything you're saying is the relationship with money and women's relationship with money.
Yeah.
And there are so many parallels to our willingness to receive. And one of the biggest things that I did in my journey was I worked on my willingness to receive it all. So rather than having conditional worth of, I'll receive the positive comments, but I won't receive the negative. And I'm willing to receive love, but I'm not willing to receive criticism. Having the nervous system capacity, which if you're not watching and you're listening, I'm basically doing like a big stretch with my arms. Having nervous system capacity, that is being able to hold it all. Like we don't heal so we're living in this like 1% joyful life. Like we heal so that we can handle when fucking shit hits the fan and not fall apart and it takes us out the game for 2 weeks, but also so that we can actually feel the depths of positive emotion, because most women are living in this narrow, and I say women because I can only speak for one being one, but we're living in this narrow set of like this is what it feels like to feel good, and this is what it feels like to feel bad. There is a breadth of emotion and life experience way outside of good and bad. And as somebody who had never really experienced joy, and I can't believe I'm saying this until I was 36, never really experienced feeling safe to feel joyful and feeling safe to relax and feeling safe to like go on fucking vacation and not think about money or my fucking business didn't happen till I was 30 fucking 6 because it wasn't safe. That wasn't safe. And this is the thing. So many intelligent women are like, it is safe. I have money. I have this. I'm like, you're up in your head. Safety is not a head game. Safety is an energy, body, nervous system, feeling safe game. And so that I was waiting for you to say surrender. I was like, she's going to say it. She's going to say it. She's going to say it. And like the word surrender to me as somebody who was massively stuck in wounded feminine and masculine for years, right? Through on a deep level, lack of self-worth would have been like, I'm not fucking surrendering. I'm a fucking warrior. Like, I'm going to fucking fight through this. I'm going to get through this. And what we forget is that that energy is such a different contrast to that energy of receivership, that energy of like, it's coming, it's happening. I'm here for it. Like that free flowing, beautiful, abundant energy that shows up with money and that shows up with babies and, you know, raising children. And what most people forget when it comes to money is that receivership is a feminine energy. So when women are in this hustle culture, boss babe, fucking keep working, and wonder why they're not getting ahead financially, or wonder why they have such like strict or tight restrictions around money, or end up in these cycles, I'm like, honey, because the wounded feminine, or, you know, whichever way, the dark, the light, the wounded feminine, that is what's holding you back. It's not your work ethic. It's not your ability to, it's not how good you are at your job or what good you are at your business. It's simply how safe you feel to surrender and receive. And to your point earlier, you know, there's a big parallel there in the society we've been raised in about what it means to be successful. And there's become almost, to your point before we jumped on, about this almost like this race between men and women. So I'd love to, I know it's a bit of a pivot, but let's go there and maybe we'll find our way back. I'd love for you to share a little bit about what you said to me before we jumped on, about that feminism has almost become the opposite of what it started for. I'd love for you to riff on that, because I feel exactly the same, but it's really difficult to express that sometimes through just our kind of lens of what we do for work. And so I guess I'm kind of really interested to hear, and especially because you've done a TED Talk on it, right? And I know that you're planning to do another one. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on modern day feminism and how that's showing up for us in a problematic way.
Yeah, absolutely. So just sort of circling back to where we just were, it's the difference between being in your human doing mode and your human being mode, isn't it? And the feminine is in the being. It's in the receptive being. And so I feel that when feminism came about, when it started, and all of the women who sacrificed so that we could have equity, they had the best intentions. And I think it's evolved into something else. And I think it's evolved into something that's sort of gone the whole way back around, so that now we're refeeding back into the same narrative that's actually suppressing us even further, but we're doing it to ourselves now. It's not, we can't say somebody else is doing this to us or making us suffer. We're doing it to ourselves. So my take on that is that we've taken it that far that we are trying to prove and show so badly that we can be just as good as men. We can do everything that men can do. But why do we want to? Then we are still making men or the masculine energy the comparative or the standard or the thing that we need to be sort of equitable to. But we're not. We're an entirely separate energy with entirely different needs, with entirely different ways of expressing. And we've got to a point where we're trying so hard to be that I can do anything a man can do. Even if you look at like adverts for tampons, you'll never watch a tampon advert in the same way now. The narrative is, just put this tampon in and you can do anything. You can do absolutely anything whilst you're on your period. You can jump out of a plane. You can go smash yourself in the gym. You can go ride a horse. You can do all the things. Go and do a massive presentation. When actually, we aren't linear. We don't have a consistent physiology and we don't have consistent hormonal fluctuations. We respond to the moon, who she moves in and out and she's all over. We are not the same like the sun. And what we're doing is we're pushing ourselves so hard. We're trying to be 100% of the time, just for the sake of upholding this sort of title of feminism, that we're actually completely neglecting the very elements and the very aspects that make us feminine beings, that make us different. We aren't the same. We can do everything a man can do, but we don't have to. And actually, why are we trying to when that means we're disconnecting from ourselves and it's coming at a cost of our own health? I think this is another reason why there's so many women struggling with hormones, fertility, all those different things, because you're going against what is your natural calling, and that is to be a cyclical being. So again, like, this is a really interesting sort of conflict that comes up on my socials all the time of there's no research to suggest that your training should change throughout the month. So if you're looking just from a training perspective, there's no piece of paper to say you're actually going to be weaker when you're on your period and you're actually going to be stronger when you're ovulating. So just be consistent in the gym and go and do what you need to do. However, do you feel more tired when you're on your period? Do you feel differently? Do you feel a little bit more emotional, or do you feel like your perspective on the world changes? Do you feel different in your energy? Does your body feel different? It does for me, and it does for every single woman that I work with. So by sort of buying into this narrative that we can be the same as men, it's actually just taking us further away. Why do we want to be the same as men? Because we're not. We're different. And why is it that it's women that are trying to morph into what I like to call a pseudo man? Why are we morphing into a pseudo man and it's not the other way around? Because the underlying thread is that women are weaker, or the downgrade, or they're not as good. So we're in this really weird like dichotomy of where, as women, we're trying to be pseudo men in the name of feminism, but the irony is that's actually taking us further away from what we need, from everything that we need to honor the energy that we have and the physiology that we have. It isn't worse. It's not comparative. You can't compare the two because they're different. They're different energies. Equitable energies, yes, we are equal, but we're not the same. So, like, going back to I'm so glad you have this candle. It's helping so much. Going back to the yin and the yang, they're equal energies, but they're different. And they're just in one container. So they're not the same. So why are we trying to be the same as men and do all of the things? And the payoff is that whilst we're doing that, we are still very much led by traditional or old school or old fashioned or whatever we want to call them narratives of women still should be primary caregiver. They should still be really in that role, mothering role. If you're sort of our age, then you're probably also going to start to be morphing into caregiver for parents as they get older as well. So we have all these like traditional roles: homemaker, doing everything at home, looking after everything in your own environment. But you also now, in the name of feminism, have to be at the absolute top of your A game in your business, making all the money, contributing, doing all the hours at work. Like and that's only for women. That hasn't happened for men. Whilst we're trying to fulfill all the more traditional male roles, is that happening in reverse? Do we have the same amount of pressure on men to be primary caregivers, homemakers, all that sort of stuff? No, it's just all on women. So we're just carrying all of that, just us. So yeah, why do we want to be the same as men? Because we're not. So at the sake of looking after ourselves and nurturing our feminine, nurturing our hormones, everything that makes us really powerful beings, we need to stop being pseudo men.
Yeah, and do you know what's really interesting about that is that one of the things that I talk to a lot of my like more one-to-one when this, because obviously this is quite a personal subject, but it comes up is around women who are not fulfilled in their romantic life or their sex life. And one of the common threads that I can pull between all of the clients that I work with that have this is they are very much in the wounded masculine and the wounded feminine. So what they're not in is this powerful embodied energy. They're not embodying those things. So what I then try to explain to them is that there's no space for a man. So even if you were, so I give it the example of me and my current husband. So when we first got together, I was very much in like boss babe. I was very in my boss babe era, my hustle culture era. I was like, I was, coming off a divorce. I was like, I was just running. I was running. That's the truth. I was absolutely running. But now I can only see that looking back, right? And so when I was ever in that energy, the last thing I wanted to do was have sex. That's like the last thing I would want to do, which is a deeply intimate kind of energy, right? Is like, and again, you can have sex where you're in the masculine energy and he's in the feminine. You can totally have sex like that. But that wasn't vibing for him because you can't have
Yeah.
two people, again, just like the yin and the yang, right? You can't have two people in the same energy and expect it to flow. So you can't be like, and I think this is something that I think sometimes it sounds a bit woo-woo, but honestly, if you can recognize the fact that you are the one who's in the wounded masculine and the feminine, you're trying to be both, to your point about this kind of like, we're trying to be both, we're trying to be everything. Where is there room for a man to be your masculine support structure, if you want to call it like that? Where is there room for a man to worship you like a goddess so that you can receive sensually and sexually and maybe in a fertility concept, right? Where is there room for that? Because there isn't. And so on an energetic level, right? And my husband has a deep, like a very beautiful masculine, feminine flow with him. Like his is very open, whereas a lot of men I meet, it's kind of more like, okay, there's some wounded masculine and there's probably some soft feminine in there, you know, but like my husband is 100%, like he has no trauma. It drives me fucking crazy. But like he is just this beautiful human, right? But what's been great about that for me to like witness is that when he's in his feminine, it's normally because he either needs me to be in my masculine. Like something the other day, he was like, I'm trying to figure this out in some software. He was doing something and I have a little bit of a brain for code and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, let me look at it. So then I went into kind of the fixer, I can do this masculine kind of like provider, protector kind of energy for that whole 3 minutes. And afterwards he was like, oh, I'm so grateful. Thank you so, which was a much softer. Do you see what I mean? But that's a really small example of how is exactly it's supposed to work. And that's why we never argue, because we're never butting heads. We're just flowing into who is taking on what role in what area of life. And like, it's not traditional in our house either. Like for a long time, I was the number one financial provider. Now we are like the find the 50-50 flow. But like, so I was in that, I guess, traditionally more masculine role, although, you know, I'd question that now, but traditionally more masculine, like primary, you know, what's they call it? Breadwinner. I'm the breadwinner, you know, that didn't make him more feminine. That didn't make him weak to me. Right. But it's been interesting how one flow has happened, the other has. And I think that's something that I think if we could help women understand that, even on a woo-woo level, that when you're in this like masculine, do, hustle, like constant like drive, need to be everything, like there's no room for that beautiful soft feminine. There's no room for a man to support you either.
Yeah, absolutely. And interestingly, I wish Rick was in the room right now because he's sort of a lot of the work that he does is sort of the work that we both do complements each other. So a lot of what he does is around so he's doing a TED talk this year. I don't know if I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can show you that, but I did. But he's doing his TED talk this year, and his is going to be around sort of the masculine and how actually, again, sort of similar to what we were just saying about how we're trying to make the feminine the same as the masculine, how that is also, it's not just harming us, it's also making it harder for men to be within their masculine, because it's like, what does it even mean? I don't even know what it means anymore. So yeah, he's downstairs, God damn it. It would have been really interesting to have him in the room. I do feel that because, I don't know, how many healthy masculine energies, like I don't like the word toxic masculinity.
No, I don't love it either. But I know what you're saying. Like, how many men are there that are actually in an, like, I call it an embodied because I feel like it's more like they would.
Yeah.
How many men
Yeah.
are really in an embodied masculine? But I also think, from my experience, I think men can learn to be in that if you are really safe. Like, it's like modeling with kids, right? Like, if you're someone who eats healthy and does your exercise, you know, I love those videos on Instagram of like where the mum's working out, doing a Pilates and the kids are like trying to get involved and like that kind of energy of modeling. I do think if a woman, like I say to my clients all the time, you can only clean up your side of the street. So if you are doing your stuff to clean up your relationship with your feminine and your masculine and your wounds and your trauma and walking out how you want to be, either your man will line up and his work will happen energetically speaking, because he will just start to flow with you, or the relationship will end because it will no longer be, I'm talking about pure like law of attraction shit here. You'll just no longer be a match. There'll be nothing there for you. But I think so many women are caught in this expectation that a man has to be this, 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 or I can't be this, 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 this. And I think it's flipping that of I'm going to be this, 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 so that a man can be. Do you know what I mean? So I guess I was just trying to flip it on its head of like the
Yeah.
expectation on the man to be X, Y, Z is almost stopping you or the woman from being in her feminine because she's waiting for the man to be in his masculine for her to be able to do that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So again, this is something that comes up on social all the time. A woman can't be in her healthy feminine unless she's with a man in his healthy masculine. And I don't agree with that because again, that's putting the feminine as, yes, it is receptive, but it's not dependent. I don't need a man to show up in his masculine for me to be in my feminine. I'm in my feminine and I can be in my masculine if I want to be in my masculine, but I don't need that to sort of validate mine, if that makes sense. But that was really interesting because when you were talking then, I was thinking, I think that's part of the reason why me and Rick have done this for so long, because I've been so stuck in my, yeah, but I don't need you, or I can do things by myself, or I'm a strong, independent woman and I don't need a man to take care of me. No, I don't. But once I've actually allowed myself to, again, to surrender into being it's okay to be looked after and it's okay to let that really strong masculine energy in, then we've completely merged back together again. And that's because he can flow in and out of his masculine and his feminine, and I can flow in and out of mine. And just literally listening to how you were talking about you and Josh, we're exactly the same. Like we merge and move together because again, it's not one or the other, it's both and all of it. So yeah, I love that. That's such an interesting topic. I'm going to feed that back to him because I think that would be a really good thing for him to talk about in his TED Talk.
You're welcome.
And
No, I'm seriousness, you know, like that energy of just helping women understand again, it just coming back to that. It's not learned helplessness, but this feeling of like, I can't do this because of this. And especially around this energy, like how can I be in my, divine or embodied or whatever word you want to use, feminine when I don't have a man in my life? I'm like, oh, I can give you a fucking list, honey. Like, but it's that thought of like, to your point about the traditional roles and like the old school. Well, if he doesn't do that, if he's not primary breadwinner, how can I be in my feminine? Because if I'm primary breadwinner, how can I be? Do you know what I mean? And I think it's understanding these energies changed my entire relationship with Josh. And had I not understood this at the beginning, we might not even be together because I wouldn't have understood that one thing doesn't mean something else. It's all about how we use that energy flow and like the yin and the yang, how that ebbs and flows, and how sometimes whenever we do butt heads, it's normally because we're both passive about something, so wounded feminine, or because we're both aggressive about something, both in wounded masculine, about a topic. It's never because we're both in our, like, there's some few things that we're kind of focused on for 2026, 2027. And like, we are both absolutely embodied fucking masculine. We are like, fucking yes, let's go. And so we can both be in the same energy, but that's also not the energy where like, we'd probably have sex in that energy. Do you know what I mean? Like it's about finding that like flow. And I think it's so hard to articulate, but when you experience it for the first time, and in fact, I will recommend this book. This is recommended to an old mentor I had in network marketing. The book is called, and it's so old school. It's written in like the 50s or something, but the principles are the key. The book is called Getting to I Do. Now, obviously, you might be married or already, like, whatever, whoever's listening to this, but it is old school. It talks about women in a slightly more subservient way to men, but the principles of it are so easy to understand in societal culture about the need for you to both have an understanding of who's masculine and who's feminine in this role. Because again, like we think about, we're both heterosexual, but I've got a lot of same-sex marriage friends, same-sex parents. And so it is interesting. I think sometimes you can almost witness the feminine and the masculine easier in your same sex sets of friends because you're able to see how they're ebbing and flowing. Like I've got two friends and they've got two children, and they are both, you would never say, oh, he's the masculine one, he's the feminine one, because they change roles depending on what it is. And it is, I could list you exactly, in this situation, it would be this one. And in this situation, it would be this one. And it's so interesting to be able to see that. But I sometimes think it's easier to see when it's not the stereotype.
Yeah, interesting. But absolutely, it's a dynamic flow. It's not, you are all, because again, that all or nothing mindset is the wounded masculine. It's having the ability to flow in and out of each and all of them depending on the scenario. So for us, for example, when we are in like a more sexual dynamic, he's pure masculine and I'm fully in my feminine. And that is what works for us the best, you know, that's how we
Same. We're exactly the same.
just on like a different dimension, you know, you're just in a different world. In
Now
that,
people are
in
like,
that,
okay, guys, stop talking. It's too much. My kids are listening.
Actually, this is a really interesting story. I'm more than happy to share this story, and I'm sure Rick will be elated that I share this story. So before we got together, I think me and you have talked about this, Luce. I was really struggling to have an orgasm. I just couldn't have one. It was just like I can't. It's just not happening. And somebody that I was dating actually referred to me as the PlayStation level that nobody can crack because it just was not happening. And at the time, I can remember thinking, like, is it that, or do you just not how to use the controller? Is it that, or is it something more like sort of, is it me? Is it a me thing? Am I broken? And I actually even thought maybe I've physically damaged my body from doing ridiculously heavy hip thrusts. I had convinced myself I've got nerve damage because of all this crazy heavy training that I've done.
Can I
Anyway,
just say, before you carry on, what is so weird about this, and this is when I love when this happens. My husband and I were talking this morning about funny Instagram accounts that show up. And I was saying that in Pilates yesterday, we were talking about this woman who had really clever Instagram. Whenever you see her thing, she says, oh, you can see me. Do you Kegel exercises? Brilliant. She's going to go viral. You're going to do them, right? And I was saying this morning, what a smart idea for an account. And Josh was saying, oh my God, this, I know you're going to think this is really weird, but this account came up on my Instagram page of all these women in like a Pilates studio vibe, but on mats, basically doing like, you know, hip thrusts and pelvic stuff, making like sexual noises. And he's like, that's genius because all the women are going to watch it and so are all the men. And it's just so funny that we are. And I said to him, my response was, well, the thing is, if you haven't got a pelvic floor, darling, you can't have an orgasm. And so we were having this and this is not a conversation that we have ever had before. And of course, we had it this morning about 2 hours ago. So
amazing.
I just thought the synchronicity of this moment I had to share.
And I was actually writing up I have an embodiment vault on my new program, and I literally have a section on how to work with your pelvic floor and how that is the master of the orgasm. Anyway, let me come back to my story. So then I met Rick, and because of the energy that I could be within whilst I was with him, it was like I actually cried the first time that we had sex and I had an orgasm. I cried because I'd literally convinced myself that I'd broken myself, I'd done something to myself, or whatever the narrative was at the time. And because of this space that he held me in, it was completely different. It was like instant. And that was because I was very much in that scenario, in my receptive, in my feminine, in my surrender, because orgasm's a surrender, right? It's not we use words like reach or climbing up, and it's not. Orgasm is pure feminine energy. It's a descension. It's not a climb or an ascension. It's a descend. It's like when you fall asleep, you don't climb to sleep. Sleep is the feminine, you know? It's this complete letting go. Yeah. And I think because we're so like we're in that's a great way to probably articulate it. We're constantly in that climbing up energy when actually in some scenarios, to me, in a sexual scenario, for me to be in my most present version of myself, it needs to have the ability for me to be able to release and let go and have that safety and that receptivity. So in that dynamic, he's so in his masculine and I'm so in my feminine. But then in other ways, other scenarios, we completely shift. And like you were saying with Josh, there'll be moments where you go into your masculine and actually you can hold the space for him as well. Because I think for a lot of men, they don't feel safe either. We've got this sort of weird situation where the feminine doesn't feel safe to be in the feminine, the masculine doesn't feel safe to be in the masculine, and vice versa. So we have things like I help him with his food and his nutrition, and I go into that really like nurturing role. But then there's other times where I have to be really assertive with him and let him go into that really soft energy. And afterwards, he's like, oh, like literally same as Josh, like, oh, thank you so much. Like, and I can tell that's like really had a big impact on him. Because whilst I think it's easier for us to go into either our masculine or our feminine, I do think it's a lot harder for men to be more to be safer to go into their feminine. Like they have to be in their masculine all the time, you know? So yeah, really interesting.
I wanted to kind of come back to kind of the hormone issues. And I've done quite a few podcasts on hormones over the years and lots of webinars and all sorts of things with lots of different professionals. And I guess I'm curious because you said it earlier, like there isn't one best way, and my favorite phrase, and every decent coach out there who's worth their weight in gold will say it depends, and if they're not saying it depends and they're saying this is the way, then they're probably not that good. But I guess if you were somebody who was right now feeling maybe it's fertility, maybe it's hormone issues. So it's kind of this kind of specific area. And they're resonating with what we've said, but equally they feel more drawn to kind of like the energy of fixing the problem. Let's call it that. So kind of right now they're experiencing maybe some hormone issues. They're kind of like feeling a bit lost. They're a bit kind of like, where the fuck do I go from here? That sense of stuckness, maybe the sense that we were in a few years back when we had no idea what direction to go in. I guess what direction would you move in? Like what would be your, and again, general advice, if someone was to ask me general advice on trauma, I would say find something kind of somatic therapy that kind of allows you, that you have fun with, that feels light, and maybe find someone you can start talking to. That would be like my general advice. So on the flip side of that, when it comes to kind of endometriosis, adenomyosis, PCOS, PMS, perimenopause, all the things, where would you go next? What would be kind of like your next move?
So I would go nurture what is sort of encapsulated as the yin energy in terms of your sleep. So really the foundations are always pretty much the same. So nurturing your yin activities, so your sleep, managing the yang activities, so anything that induces stress. So the easiest way to explain this is your yin hormones are your sex hormones, your estrogen, your progesterone. Your yang hormones are your cortisol and adrenaline, your stress hormones. What can you do right now to get the balance so that you're nurturing the yin just as much as that yang is burning through everything? Because the yang is the fire, the masculine is the fire, the cortisol, the adrenaline is the fire, the yin, the progesterone, the estrogen, the feminine is the water. So how can you create that balance? It's why things like burnout, makes it so much easier to understand, because it's just that yang energy that's just burning through everything. So what can you do to create balance within that container? So it's looking at your sleep, making sure you're sleeping properly and doing everything, literally protecting your sleep like a lioness. How can you manage your stress as much as humanly possible? Obviously, that's going to come in a thousand different representations. And then really looking at what you're absorbing into your body. What are you drinking? What are you eating? What products are you using? All those sorts of things. And then really looking at what's the history, what's the trauma, what's the emotional things that you're possibly not dealing with. That would be sort of like the general, but as we say, it would totally depend on the person. So if you imagine like a pyramid, that's sort of like the foundation, and then how you build that up is going to vary layer to layer depending on the person. Something that's really huge as well is actually prioritizing your dietary fat. Like we still have this weird thing where we don't want to eat fats, and actually as a female, that needs to be in there first, like making sure you've got your good, really good, nutritious, eating the rainbow, as many different food sources, and getting rid of all the sort of constraints around restrictive eating, fucking calorie counting, see you later, not bothered, measuring stuff, and actually nourishing your body based on what it needs and what it wants. So they would be like the foundation things that I would sort of start with, and then building on top from there. One of the questions that people always ask me first if they're struggling with something is, what supplements do I need? And I'm like, you can supplement all you want. You can throw as many supplements into the mix as possible, but if these foundations are still really rocky, you're always going to be building on something that's just eventually going to collapse. So
House on Sand, my favorite, House on Sand.
Yeah. Think about the details later, and look at those bigger foundational things first. Nature, so simple. Get outside. Be with nature. You are, as a woman, you are an extension of biology. You are an extension of Mother Earth. You respond to the earth, you respond to the sunlight, you respond to the cycles of the moon. Like in history, all women responded to the moon in terms of their menstrual cycle. That's why we have 13 lunar cycles. It's why we have 13 periods
And
a
there
year.
should be
That's why,
13 months. And it
and
annoys
there
me.
should be 13. Yes,
Fucking
absolutely. And that's
patriarchy.
why 13 is unlucky. No, it's
Feminine.
it's just a
My
part
favorite
of a
number.
representation. Yeah, it's just a representation of the feminine. Again, control, suppress it, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
Um, but get to know the lunar cycle, get to know your menstrual cycle. And then that is a whole thing in itself, unpicking the layers of conditioning, shame, messages around like your actual period and what it is and what it means and how amazing it is. Like I deliver an entire masterclass called The Power of the Period. And every time I deliver it, everybody's just like, because it just goes down so well. So yeah, they'd be the foundation things. All the yin, all nourish all the yin, the sleep, the reduction of your stress, connecting to nature, and actually nourishing yourself in ways that really, really matter. Let yourself rest. I do another one called Rest is Medicine. Just rest, just stop, just be, just do nothing, just exist.
And the thing is that it's so hard for women that are caught in their fight flight, who are stuck in that dysregulation of their nervous system. And because of the conditioning, the programming, and because there's something happening on a trauma level. And this is why you cannot separate. This is to your point earlier about, things being holistic. You cannot ever look at anything and decide this is the strategy for that, because it's about, to your point, your body and energy and mind, and everything's a cosmos. Love that phrase. Everything's a cosmos. And so there are things at play outside of just your fucking Instagram growth strategy, or there are things at play outside of the calorie meal plan that you have. And when we start looking at ourselves as a big picture, and like I think one of the phrases I had the other day was start looking at yourself as a magnificent creator and a magnificent being. If you actually were able to zoom out and see that perspective, you would never get so into the detail and the minutia, because you would never need to.
Mhm.
And I just think so
Yeah.
much of what you've said has encapsulated that seeing ourselves from that different perspective is probably actually the first step in any route of whatever they've resonated with, is being able to see yourself almost outside of yourself and to not be so in everything, so that you can almost
Mm.
see it, witness it, rather than be in it. I think that's also the problem, isn't it? Sometimes we get so caught up in the truth of the experience and what we're actually going through that we lose any sense of perspective. And I know that happens a lot with fertility, like a lot with that kind of sense of like what's going on, and it becomes kind of a blame thing. I guess there is one more thing I guess I wanted to talk about, and I kind of didn't really know whether this would come up or not, is in the nature of talking about well-being. I've talked before on this podcast about the fact that in 2012, I always get those 2 years mixed up because they feel like one. I had a breast implant rupture, and unfortunately didn't find out very soon, and unfortunately had toxic shock and was a very, very poorly person, and took, well, as everybody knows, years and years and years to get well, to rebuild my nervous system, to rebuild my immune system, to my, and even now we don't poke my liver. We leave my liver alone. It's full of silicon. We don't poke it. We don't do liver flushes. We don't do liver cleanses, and I'm all good, right? As long as we don't poke it, we are fine. But I did make the decision at the time, which I'm very transparent about, to have implants replace the ruptured ones, because I was not in the emotional or like mental place that I am now, where I could wrap my head around the thought of not having the implants. And I am in a different place now. And, I have no symptoms of breast implant illness. And should anything arise, or should I, get to a place where I feel like it's time to remove them, I absolutely would. And I wouldn't have no intention of replacing them. Which brings me nicely onto the fact that obviously 2024 for you was the year you had an explant. So I know this is going to be such an interesting topic. I'm conscious how long we've been chatting, but equally, I do think that even if I had to crop this out as its own mini pod, I think this would be something interesting to explore. So what led you to the explant in the first place?
So a mix of different things. Again, so there wasn't just sort of one thing in isolation. It was a mix. And I've had, when I look back now, I've had symptoms of breast implant illness from 18 months after I had them put in. Things that at the time, it was hard to decipher what's causing what, because I'd just opened a yoga studio, so stress levels absolute optimum, out the back end of competing. So I've just battered my body for 5 years anyway, and going through lots of things emotionally. So it was kind of hard to figure out what's causing what. But when I look back in hindsight now, it was 18 months after, which is actually a really common timeline. So a lot of the women that I've had contact with in terms of explant and having breast implant illness, the symptoms usually start to occur about 18 months to 2 years after, but it can be anything after that. And those symptoms I had for 8 years. Obviously, we talked so much about gut health. That was sort of one of the first things I think me and you ever connected on. And really struggling. I couldn't eat anything without having indigestion or bloating or just being really poorly. I had really bad cystic acne. I think when I met you, actually, Luce, it was when it was all here and all on my neck. And there were huge cysts, which now I know in hindsight was probably just my lymph nodes being like, what is this? Fatigue to another level. I would have to sleep for like 12, 13 hours a night and I'd still wake up and feel absolutely battered, or I'd be the total opposite and I'd have insomnia for like a week straight and couldn't sleep. Like my sleep was horrendous. My endometriosis symptoms got worse. My mood was really bad. I'd go from anxiety, depression, really bad depression, panic attacks, and sort of just keep sort of cycling back between them. And I just felt so unwell all the time. Everything hurt, everything ached, everything felt inflamed. And I did everything I possibly could from like an internal point of view. And how, when I think about it now, it's crazy that it didn't really sort of occur to me. Maybe it's these foreign objects in your body that's your body's sort of saying, okay, we need to get this out and we need to get this out now. Anyway, so I had that for a really long time. And then from a sort of professional point of view, I've come out of the back end of competing because I just wasn't that person anymore. Talking about health, talking about loving yourself. Meanwhile, I am obliterating myself. I am punishing my body day in, day out by battering it into oblivion. My period stopped for 2 years. I'm not eating a breadth of food. I'm eating for aesthetic's sake. I'm not eating for nourishment or just fucking joy. Food is joy. Like not having that in my life. Talking about self-love and how we all need to love ourselves and blah, 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 blah. But I'm going to sit here with a part of my body that doesn't even belong to me. It's not mine. I'm not in that energy of full acceptance, which is what the dark feminine is. And you said something earlier about it's that acceptance of every emotion, good, bad. It's that acceptance of every experience, good, bad, and being receptive to everything, rather than I'm just gonna enjoy the good stuff and just completely ignore all the bad stuff. It's everything. And I just kept feeling like, how can I talk about all these different things when I know for me, obviously this doesn't apply to everybody, but I know for me deep down, I've still got that inner battle there. I'm not fully accepting of myself. So how can I be educating other people about it or trying to get other people into that space? I'm not doing it authentically. And it just felt like there was this constant friction and resistance between who I'm sort of trying to be, but who I actually really am. So there was a big mix of things. Came out of that, obviously got into yoga, which does Lucy do yoga now? You're a Pilates girl, aren't you?
I'm a reformer girl, but you will be pleased to know I've been doing some Kundalini yoga more recently
Have you? That doesn't mean
as part of my future alignment journey. Some Kundalini yoga has found its way into my morning routine. So
amazing. I love
proud.
that. I am very proud. So yeah, so then obviously I went down that sort of trajectory. Then we went into lockdown and sort of shit hit the fan, in want of a better word. And it was like, what can I do like now? What can I what am I going to do for work? What am I going to do for money? And just because of the nature of what I'd already done, it was just easier at the time to sort of pick my coaching back up in the sort of fitness, weight loss space. So ended up sort of getting sucked back into the vortex of that. And the entire time that I was doing it, I just had this complete friction of this is just not who I am or what I believe in. They're not my core values. I'm completely living not in alignment with what I really truly value, and that is to nourish women at a much deeper level, which is just my opinion. And so ended up getting back into yoga, specialized in women's health, specialized in hormonal health, and all that sort of stuff, and really got into the depths of what I believe is nourishment at like a soul level. Meanwhile, I feel really unwell and I feel like I'm just, I can't think of a better way to phrase this, but full of shit. Talking about sat at the front of my yoga retreats and sat at the front of my yoga classes talking about this accepting energy, this divine feminine energy, this dark feminine energy who's fully embodied, fully worships, loves, devoted to herself. But I feel like I literally have on covering my heart chakra right in the middle these two weighted bags, like just literally feeling like I'd got a cage wrapped around my chest and I could feel it,
And
like
yours were quite
energetic.
big as well, like even on a practical level, like yours were quite like heavy, weren't they, as well? Like there was a physical presence to them that I think I can feel. I don't feel that when we were talking about this earlier, and I'll share a little bit on mine in a minute, but I can feel, and I know women right now are sat there feeling exactly what you're saying about that like weight on your chest, both metaphorically and physically.
And energetically, yeah, yeah. And it was really, really synchronistically, beautifully strange, obscure, whatever you want to call it. But I woke up one day and I just thought there's something wrong with my right breast. And I can't tell you what or why, but I've had this so many times now that when that little call is there, you better fucking believe I'm going to listen to it. For whatever reason, I don't need to understand why it's there or how it's arrived. I just trust the wisdom of my body. And if that message is there for me, let's listen to it. So for a while, I was like, there's something wrong with this breast. Anyway, I went to my yoga class that night and we did an oracle deck reading, and the card that I pulled, I'll have to show you it because you'll not believe it. It was of the goddess, she's called Akilanda, and she has her right breast out. So she's completely like, she's beautifully garmented, apart from her right boob is out. And I was like, well, if that wasn't meant for me today, then I don't know what was. So I had actually already looked into breast implant illness, and I think it was about the time that we went to LA actually, where I sort of started looking into it. But I just wasn't ready to receive I just wasn't ready to read it. I read all the same stuff that I read sort of 5 years later, but at that time, I just wasn't ready for that information. Anyway, started looking back into it. And then I met my friend Haley for a coffee and we sat down, like, just obviously catching up. And she was like, I need to tell you something. And she'd just gone through an explant. And she was like, I need to talk to you because a lot of the things that you've told me over the last 8 years are all the same symptoms that I had. And they've completely gone. Like, literally, light switch, there, explant, those symptoms have gone. And had I not had her to sort of be there to nurture that within me, like I feel really privileged now that I have all these people that if they want to go through an explant, they know that my inbox is there. They know I'll talk to them and sort of honor that journey with them, as and when they're sort of ready for it as well. And once I'd sort of made the decision, Vic, 5 years previous, just wasn't even ready to listen. You could have told me anything bad about them, and I'd have just been like, no, not having them out. But this time around, as soon as I'd made that decision, it was the easiest decision I've ever made in my life. It was so simple. The sort of journey to then getting them out is its own story. It's if anybody does want to have an explant, definitely talk to me about it because it's not an easy thing to navigate. It's quite a tricky thing to navigate, which if we've got time, put a pin in that, we'll come back to it. But then once I had them taken out, this one had ruptured. So the silicone was obviously leaking into my body. On my surgical notes, it said I'd got saline implants. They weren't, they were silicone. So the surgeon that had put them in had put something different in. So I didn't even know what they were. And there was a lump behind this breast, which I had removed, which is what I feel was that like intuitive calling of my body. And when I had them taken out, the surgeon said to me, he'd taken some pictures, which I'll share with you if you want to see them, Luce, but he took some pictures and said, this is what I've obviously pulled out of your body. And obviously you have the implant, but then around it you have your capsule. So your body will form like a self-protective layer because obviously it's a foreign object and your body's trying to fight it every single day. And when he showed me what was in this capsule, that my body has absolute bad bitch vibes, built this freaking wall to protect me every day for 8 years. When I saw that, I thought, there is no wonder I have felt this unwell for this long, because my body's been working so hard to look after me and make sure this shit doesn't get into my body. And like, it's sometimes it's difficult to talk about because there's no judgment here, you know, like I got them for my reasons and I don't regret having them. I'm glad I did have them and I had that experience and I learned so much about myself from having them. So there's no judgment here. Um, but for me, it was just that, wow, that was in my body for nearly 10 years of my life. Had them taken out, and the difference was instant. Like as soon as I opened my eyes from my surgery, the tinnitus that I'd had all that time had completely gone. But it had been that bad that it was my sort of normal. I hadn't realized how bad it actually was. Came round from my surgery, and I can remember saying to Rick, I was like, "Is this what the world sounds like? Is it like this all the time?" I was like, "I can hear the birds singing. I can hear the ticking of that clock over there." It was crazy. I was like, "Wow, that's insane," and that was instant. And then, so what we now? Maybe 6 months ago, something like that. So in that 6 month period, my insomnia gone, completely gone. The pain that I used to have here and here, completely gone. My hair has grown by about this much. It's insane. So my hair is so long now. My skin is better, my hormones are better, my mood is better. Like it's literally changed my life. It's like been my reset button to getting me back to me feeling like who I really am. And then from like an aesthetic or a physical point of view, there's not been a single second where I've thought, oh, what have I done? I actually feel more feminine. I feel more womanly. I feel so much better in myself. And I feel like even though I've got really big scars on my body, I feel like, but I'm living in alignment with me. I feel like I'm who I am now. And a lot of the comments that I got were, oh, well, how does your partner feel about it? Or you know, what are you going to do from like an aesthetic point of view, blah, 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 blah. But actually, he loves me more. He's been more sort of on me. I can't get him off most of the time. Um, but if he's been brilliant, like he was absolutely incredible throughout the whole thing. But had he been the opposite, why would I want that energy in my life anyway? Surely I want to be around a man who is fully accepting of me, regardless of how I look. He loves me for me. So yeah, it's been the most transformative chapter, I think, for me that I've probably been through. Yeah.
And you know what? I would echo that by saying that when I had my rupture, well, thank God I had a rupture because it led me down a path of nutrition and well-being. It led me to becoming the trauma coach I am today. It led me down, I took years to get well after that toxicity. So I can totally relate, in the pictures of what they took out of me was pretty nasty too. And I think this is why I found it so interesting that I've never, not that I'm aware of, okay, put it out there. I've not experienced that almost since with these implants. And I'm like, it's a strange thing. And like you say, you never really know until you have them out. And like I said to you before we came on, I am ready now. Like I am emotionally, like if they had to come out tomorrow, me and needles and blood and surgery and anesthetic are still not exactly the best of friends. That's why I became a EFT practitioner, just to help myself through my needle phobia. But in all seriousness, I think I would be ready now. And so I think the key thing that you said there, and I think it's the same thing that I've also applied to levels of my business. I remember when I was kind of active in Team Superfox and my transformation coaching, I had a shit day and I can't remember what the day was or what the event was. And I remember phoning Josh and saying, I just don't know if I want to do this anymore. And he was like, we talked around it, didn't do it. A year later, I finally made the decision that it's time. And then, the same things happen in different businesses with different even with my ex-husband, I think we both were really aware our relationship wasn't working before we even got married. And like, sometimes there's just a readiness. And this is what I always say to clients who come to me and they're like, I don't, like, thanks for the discovery call. I'm like, honey, I don't want to take you on unless you're ready, because that is not one, smart business, or two, why would I want to work with someone who's not ready? And I think what you said there is so powerful, is you will know when you are ready. And so whether it's an explant or a new business or exploring a new opportunity or whatever, there's a sense of readiness that when you allow that sense, like you said, that intuition based energy to go, Excuse me. She doesn't sound she's not anxious. She never nags. She never moans. She never bitches. She just speaks with quiet confidence. And when she speaks, you motherfucking listen. And that is massively how I've lived. So I totally trust, babe, that, this is not a coincidence. And at some point, there'll be, maybe it's 2026 when, there's some better hospitals and better places and better journeys for me. I'll be able to say, okay, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go and like make this move and, undo. Like it's almost been for me. So I had my first breast augmentation when I was 20. So, what's to say I don't do it when I'm 40 in 2 years' time, and like there's a beautiful symmetry there around half my life without, half my life with, up to this point, the next journey, and I think so many women will resonate with what you've said. And also, maybe been triggered or frustrated by what you said, but actually will then know that like when it's time, they'll go, oh, so you will have been the seed that allowed them to plant that allowed them to build up that kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? That sense of like, it feels normal, the normalization of what you've said. Because if you'd said to me, if you'd done this 2 years ago and told me, I'd have been like, no. But now, like I've even spoken to Josh about it. I'm like, yeah, they'll come out. I'm not putting any back in. But it's very like flippant. It's like, yeah, when it's time, they'll come out. And I trust when it's time, it's time. And like you said, you just knew the time was the time was the time was the time was the time.
Yeah, there was no hesitation, no, oh, am I doing the right thing? No, it was, this is happening, this is what we're doing. I was the same. I as I say, when we went to LA, that was when I first became aware of BII. And like I said, you could have said anything to me. You could have told me anything about implants, and I was not in the right space to listen. And that's okay. Like that was where I was in that part of the journey. And literally, like you said, like we were saying before, had I not been through that, I wouldn't now be doing the work that I'm doing. So it's just all been part of like, maybe it does sound woo-woo, but it's all been part of my divine path and my divine timing. It is my divine timing. And had I not made that decision when I made it, which was obviously a little bit later, I might not be doing the work that I'm doing now. And I am obsessed with the work that I do now and the position that I'm in. And yeah, I think it's making decisions without pressure and force. And again, we keep coming back to this word of surrender, but surrendering that the time, when it's the right time, it will come to you. It will arrive and you'll be ready for it. And that's okay. And maybe you never do get to that time. Maybe you keep them in for the rest of your life. But if that's as long as that's what's right for you, great. That's all good, but it's, yeah, surrendering into your intuition and listening. Because I had, like I said, we'll maybe come back to this another time, but the journey I had in getting somebody to listen to me that something was wrong was a battle and a half. I went to the GP, I went to the breast cancer clinic, I went to the original surgeon who put them in, and every single person told me it doesn't exist, it's all in my head, there's nothing wrong with them, my implants are fine. The surgeon that put them in literally laughed at me in my appointment. Me and Rick came out and we were both just like, what just happened? He literally laughed at me when I said something is wrong and this is what my body's telling me. He literally laughed. But because I have done so much work on listening to that inner voice, those signs, those symptoms, I trust my body. One of the main phrases I say in my rebirth business is believe your body. Believe your body. Your body does not lie to you. So believe your body. So because I've got that sort of ingrained into my being, I kept believing my body and I just knew something was wrong. And eventually the surgeon who did take them out was absolutely outstanding, incredible, absolute life changer. He listened to me straight away and then they were out and like my life's completely transformed since then. So
and that just brings me back to that story of the power of one person, the power of that surgeon. Like it was me when I was really, really poorly, I had no idea what was wrong with me. It was a junior doctor GP. And I said, look, this PIP scandal's broken. I've been in and out of hospital for months. My liver's completely fucked. You have no idea what's wrong with my kidneys. You think I've had tropical diseases. I've had I'm not getting any better. And she was like, oh my God, I think you've got a rupture. Thank God. Thank God for that one doctor. Thank God for that one surgeon. And so never underestimate the power of one person's word and story to create that, the butterfly effect or the domino effect of your entire life. And so if you take nothing from this podcast other than just know that that sense of your inner voice, your intuition, that one voice can make such a difference, not just to you, but to so many other people through sharing your experiences. So, Vic, where can people find you? I mean, I'm sure we'll do another podcast. There's like about 4 years worth of podcasts here. So tell me, where can they find you? Where do you hang out? What's the best, where can they find all your info and your deets, etc.?
So I am the most active on my Instagram. So my Instagram handle is rebirthwithvictoria. And then we are just finishing building the last little bit of my brand new website, which is sensational, if I do say so myself. And it's so beautiful because Rick's built it for me. So it's something we've been able to do together, which is gorgeous. So my website is myrebirth.co.uk. So all of my sort of information about me, my programs, the work that I do, that sort of thing, that can all be found on there. But in terms of sort of communicating with me at a personal level, definitely on my Instagram is where I'm most active.
Love that. Thank you so much, everybody. Don't forget to leave a comment, leave a review. Let me know what you thought of the episode, and we'll answer any questions if you leave them under this video. Thank you so much for joining me, my darling, and I cannot wait to have you back soon.